Who is Muhammad? Do you really know the truth about him? Was he a divine prophet or an impostor? Was he truly a mercy to mankind? Let's find out what would be your final verdict. Talal الراوندي. Muhammad, who is he? Do you really know the truth about him? Let us examine the evidence Muhammad provided for his claim that he was the final prophet sent to mankind. The best evidence is provided by his character, his deeds, and his teachings. All that can be checked under four key areas. First, Muhammad's major events. Second, Muhammad's views on and evaluation of women. Third, Muhammad's personal behavior. And fourth, Muhammad's thoughts towards his parents. What are the major events of Muhammad? First, Muhammad's marriage to a 6-year-old girl. Second, the Banu Qurayza tribe massacre. Third, the execution of the mother of Qarfa. Fourth, Muhammad marrying his adopted son's ex-wife. Fifth, the punishment of people from Aql. Sixth, the killing of Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf and Abu Rafi'. Seventh, stoning the adulterous mother. Eighth, allowing the rape of non-Muslim women. I will critically analyze what happened in those events and what Muhammad's objectives were. Were they divine, or were they his reactions aiming to satisfy lust, greed, and/or psychotic needs? Muhammad's marriage to Aisha. Aisha was just 6 years old when she was betrothed to Muhammad, himself in his 50s, and only 9 when the marriage was consummated. Muslims are convinced that this marriage was a divine inspiration because Muhammad said, "You have been shown to me twice in my dream. I saw you pictured on a piece of silk, and someone said to me, 'This is your wife.' When I covered the picture, I saw that it was yours. I said, 'If this is from Allah, it will be done.'" This hadith is mentioned in Al-Bukhari book, reference 3895, and it is accepted as true among most Muslims. Muslims also accepted that Muhammad did marry Aisha when she was 6 years old. Let us see what kind of logic or common sense can justify this marriage. First, had Allah truly intervened to marry his prophet to a 6-year-old child? Second, can we consider dreams to be a genuine divine instruction to accept that it is normal for a 53-year-old man to marry a 6-year-old girl? Third, one wonders if the so-called wise and perfect God of Islam could have found a better way than dreams to relay his instructions to Muhammad. The result of Muhammad's ignorance in relation to his dreams, whatever they were, meant that he wrongly or perhaps even deliberately interpreted his lust and desire for marriage to a 6-year-old girl as being blessed by Allah. Fourth, was it that Muhammad would not or could not wait until Aisha was at least 15 years old, thereby allowing us to avoid concluding he was a pedophile? Fifth, did Aisha give her consent? Present-day law does not consider a child of 6 to be capable of giving sexual consent. 6. Had Muhammad thought of Aisha's future after his death? She was only 17 when Muhammad died. His only thought was to get Allah to pass a law so that none of his wives could ever get married after his death. The verse says, "You should not offend the apostle of Allah, nor may you ever marry his wives after him." Chapter 33, verse 53. Note that Muhammad left 9 widows. The Banu Qurayza tribe massacre. In 627 AD, almost 800 members of a Medinian Arab Jewish tribe, Banu Qurayza, were massacred by Muslims. The killing went on for a whole day. Those who escaped death were taken captive and sold at slave markets. This, according to Muhammad, was Allah's instruction to punish the Banu Qurayza tribe for their alleged treason in siding against Muslims during the Battle of the Trench. The instructions were clear in chapter 33, verses 26 and 27. The Banu Qurayza tribe event clearly ranks as genocide. According to Ibn Kathir, a reliable Islamic source, he said, "The Messenger of Allah commanded that ditches should be dug, and then the captives were brought and were beheaded. There were around 800 of them. The children who had not yet reached adolescence and the women were taken prisoners, and their wealth was seized." My comment. Assuming the Banu Qurayza tribe committed treachery, although there is no evidence that they did, then surely only those who were responsible should be punished and not the entire tribe. If Muhammad truly a man of peace and mercy, he would have behaved more humanely and kindly, and not as a mass murderer. Muhammad handled the Banu Qurayza tribe affair most savagely, contradicting what the Quran says, "We sent you as a mercy to all mankind." Chapter 21, verse 107. The brutal killing of the mother of Qarafa. The story about the mother of Qarafa is one of the darkest pages of Islamic history. It is an example of senseless and extreme violence. According to Ibn Ishaq, her death was an extremely cruel murder. She was killed by tying her legs to 2 camels that were driven in opposite directions. Her daughter was taken captive. She was a very pretty girl who was taken by Muhammad as his concubine. Qarafa was a leader among her people, a major opponent who would not submit to Muhammad's tyranny. Besides, Muhammad could not tolerate a woman enjoying a leadership role in any society. He said, "Never will succeed such a nation as makes a woman their ruler." Reference the Book of Bukhari, Hadith 7099. My comment. Approving the brutal killing of Qarafa proves that Muhammad was not a messenger of mercy for mankind. Muhammad clearly demonstrated that death is the penalty for disbelievers, totally ignoring the freedom of choice, as claimed by the Quran, where it says, "There is no compulsion in religion." Chapter 2, verses 256. And the other verse that says, "You have your religion and I have mine." Chapter 109, verse 6. Or should one believe that these verses were already abrogated? And why? What kind of Islamic morals did Muhammad's followers show when they took the innocent daughter of Qarafa captive, abused her, and later gave her to Muhammad to be his slave? She was said to be one of the prettiest girls in Arabia, or she was said to be one of the prettiest girls in Arabia. The Book of Muslims, Hadith 1755. Muhammad felt lust for the pretty girl, as he did for Rayhana, the captive woman of the Banu Qurayza tribe, whose husband he murdered. Muslim apologists say that Rayhana gave herself to Muhammad, but no one really believes that a woman would consent to an intimate relationship with someone who had just killed her husband and her people in cold blood. Muhammad marrying his adopted son's wife. The story of Muhammad's marriage to Zainab bint Jahish, the wife of his adopted son Zayd, clearly indicates that Muhammad's motive was his lust for a pretty woman. Muhammad's strong desire towards women was not only demonstrated by him taking 30 wives and dozens of other women as concubines or private possessions, but also by his explicit request to have any woman he fancied. The process Muhammad adopted to acquire Zainab reveals his strong desire for women and how far he was prepared to go to get any woman, girl, or child he wanted. Here we see Muhammad once more calling upon his divine support to expedite his desire to have Zainab. Allah had personally interfered to wed Muhammad to Zainab in his heavenly kingdom. As the Quran says, "So when Zayd had no longer any need for her, we married her to you." Chapter 33, verse 37. My comment. We can clearly see that Muhammad's motive in marrying Zainab was purely personal. It was his strong desire to have Zainab when, by accident, he saw her naked body. But there were two problems to be resolved. First, Zainab was a married woman, and second, which is a serious one. Her husband was Muhammad's adopted son. Therefore, Muhammad would not be able to marry Zainab even if she was divorced, as such a thing, marrying his son's ex-wife, would be against Arab tradition. Muhammad cleverly managed to solve both problems by getting Allah's support to issue his instruction, expediting Zayd's divorce and abolishing the adoption altogether. Muhammad further managed to get Allah's direct intervention to personally marry him to Zainab. The two relevant verses in the Quran are chapter 33 verse 40 and chapter 33 verse 37. There is no evidence that Muhammad saw or knew beforehand how beautiful and attractive Zainab was. If that was the case, Muhammad would not recommend her to anyone, and he would have claimed her for himself, as he did Rayhana and Qarafa's daughter. Aisha, Muhammad's third wife, had no doubt that Zainab's marriage was of Muhammad's own arrangement, and that Allah had no business in such a personal matter. She was not happy with this marriage, as can be seen from her sharp response. I feel that your Lord is quick in fulfilling your wishes and desires. That is, Muhammad desires to have Zainab. Can anyone imagine the God of Islam, the so-called creator of the universe, getting directly involved in his prophet's matrimonial affairs and do the marriage ceremony himself? Adoption is a noble undertaking, particularly if an abused or orphan child is involved. By abolishing adoption altogether, many people would be deprived of the opportunity to give love to those unfortunate children who are often desperate for security and affection. If Muhammad's objective was to help Zayd and Zainab overcome their marriage life issues, he could easily have done so without getting Allah involved. Being the supreme leader, Muhammad could have dissolved the marriage and reassigned alternative partners for Zayd and Zainab from his many followers who would have been happy to oblige. The brutal killing of people from Aql. This event was sanctioned by Allah in the Quran. The verse says, "The only reward of those who make war upon Allah and His Messenger and strive after corruption in the land will be that they will be killed or crucified or have their hands and feet on alternate sides cut off, or will be expelled out of the land." Chapter 5, verse 33. One of the vilest acts ever performed by Muhammad was the bloody torture and the murder of the men of the Aql tribe. According to Islamic sources, some men converted to Islam and traveled to Medina. Because of the climate in Medina, these men got sick, and Muhammad recommended that they drink camel's urine and milk for their ailments. The men then apostatized, killed the herdsmen, and took off with the flock. Mohammed sent an expedition to catch them, and once they were caught, Mohammed had them brutally tortured to death. You will find details of this in Al-Bukhari Hadith number 6805. My comment. Here again we see Muhammad's horrific punishment is contrary to what the Quran says about him being a merciful prophet. Chapter 21, verse 107. Besides, a divine prophet should never exact such brutal revenge or any other behavior that can be seen as typical of a tyrannical or unstable person. Death as a punishment for unlawful killing is sanctioned by Islam or Islamic Sharia law. But to mutilate the bodies and eyes of living people is severe human cruelty, well understood by psychological science. Such cruelty continues around the world to this very day. Islamists claim that Muhammad had done to those criminals what they themselves had done to the shepherd. But there is no evidence to support their claim, as the above hadith does not mention anything of the sort. However, even assuming the claim was true, it is impossible to imagine a divine prophet retaliating in such a barbaric and savage way. Killing Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf and Abu Rafi'. After Muhammad came to Medina, he began to grow in power. However, many people, both Jews and Arabs, were opposed to him. Muhammad began to silence his opposition by various means. One of these means was to have them killed. Muhammad had killed a total of 43 of his opponents, and best-known targets included 2 Jews who had written poetry ridiculing him and his divine message. They were Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf and Abu Rafi'. These two were assassinated in 624 AD. My comment. The killings of Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf and Abu Rafi' were clear evidence that Muhammad would not accept anyone criticizing him or being free to speak his or her mind. In killing his opponents, Muhammad wanted to send this message: let death be the penalty, to guarantee no one would dare to challenge anything I say or do. If Allah were really threatened by these people, he could have dealt with them himself. Or should Allah need to ask men to sneak around and murder people on his behalf? Stoning the adulterous mother. This is a real heartbreaking event. One cannot imagine a divine prophet taking the life of a mother simply to purify her from sin. The woman had just finished breastfeeding her child. In Mutawa Malik, Book 41, Hadith 1507, one can see how Muhammad arranged to kill the adulterous mother mercilessly. My comment. A merciful prophet of God would never execute anyone, let alone a mother with a 2-year-old toddler. But this pathological cruelty is all justified under Allah's penalty for adultery. Has Muhammad really thought of the dreadful things that would happen to the child after their mother's death, such as being deprived of her care and love, not to mention that they would be haunted by their mother's horrible execution for the rest of their lives? Muhammad could have easily obtained a pardon from his loving God Allah. It would have been a simple so-called divine Quranic revelation, similar to those that Allah had already bestowed upon Muhammad, such as marrying Zainab, acquitting his wife Aisha from being accused of having an affair with a man called Safwan, preventing his wives from marrying after his death, allowing his warriors to rape their prisoners of war, instructing his invited guests not to linger about in his house once they had finished eating their meals. Allowing the rape of non-Muslim women. In other words, sex with captive women is approved. When the Battle of Hunain was over, Muhammad's followers managed to capture some women along with their husbands. Muhammad's warriors wanted to have sex with the captured women, but they were apprehensive as the Arabs considered such an act shameful and against their morals. Muhammad's followers, feeling a sexual urge and knowing there was a golden opportunity at hand, asked Muhammad for his advice. Muhammad responded with a revelation from Allah that says, "You are prohibited from having sexual intercourse with women who are already married, except those whom you acquire through war, or those you buy from the slave markets." Chapter 23, verse 5. My comment. What the Muslims did at Hunain was a savage mass rape in broad daylight. This horrific sexual assault on helpless married women was sanctioned by Muhammad and the God of Islam. What kind of moral conduct could justify such behavior? According to lying Islamists, the captive women gave their consent. Gave their consent? Did I hear that clearly? Oh no, there are 3 words missing, and those words are "under the sword." But then, of course, with the sword or with the threat of the sword, one could obtain any consent. Muhammad was not concerned with morality when he and Allah encouraged his followers to rape. He was concerned with keeping his men satisfied, hence ensuring their loyalty for his personal gain. I wonder how Muslims would react if captive Muslim wives daughters, sisters, or mothers were raped in accordance with the infidels' religious scriptures. Muhammad's views on and evaluation of women. Muhammad saw women as slaves to serve and please men. Muslim apologists argue Muhammad had nothing against women, and he always treated them well, giving his good behavior to his wife Aisha, his 6-year-old wife, as an example. Yes, that is true, and I suppose the same example goes for Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, and all the other evil dictators who always appear to have been nice to their women or mistresses. What one sees is a beautifully colored mask to cover up a self-indulgent, pathological lust, often driven by mental instability or schizophrenic behavior. Here is what had been sanctioned for women in Islam. The Quran instructs men to beat their wives. Chapter 4, verse 34. This hadith from the book of Sunan Abu Dawud, reference 2142. The hadith says, a man on Judgment Day will not be asked as to why he beats his wife. The Quran regards women as sex objects. Chapter 23, verses 5 and 6. Angels would curse women who deny their husbands' requests for sex. Reference Bukhari authenticated hadith number 3237. Women who committed adultery should be confined in their homes till death claims them. Chapter 4, verse 15. A Muslim husband can divorce his wife by saying, "You are divorced." Muhammad says that the majority of people to be put in hell would be women. Reference Bukhari's authenticated hadith number 304. In the same hadith, it is also stated that women are deficient in their intelligence. Women are failures as leaders. Reference Bukhari's authenticated hadith number 7099. Women are bad luck and evil in nature. Reference Bukhari's authenticated hadith number 2858. Muhammad kept female slavery. In fact, he acquired several women as his slaves. Some Allah bestowed upon him as an exceptional gift. Chapter 33, verse 50. One wonders if Muhammad needs more sex than other men around him. Muhammad's ego and self-admiration. No leader has yet demanded obedience or sought self-appraisal and admiration as much as Muhammad did. Much evidence indicates that Muhammad was narcissistic and self-obsessed. Evidence are clearly highlighted in the following. In some 40 Quranic verses, Muhammad has associated his name with Allah. All Muslims must obey, follow, and love Muhammad in the same way they do for Allah. Muhammad says, "None of you Muslims is a true believer unless or until I am more beloved to him than all his family, his wealth, and the whole of mankind. Reference An-Nasa'i authenticated hadith number 5014. The Quran instructs Muslims to bless Muhammad following the example of Allah and his angels who are constantly blessing Muhammad. Chapter 33, verse 56. In this hadith, Muhammad says that a mean person is the one in whose presence I am mentioned, and he does not send blessings upon me. Reference At-Tirmidhi authenticated hadith number 3546. Muhammad claimed himself to be the seal of all prophets. Chapter 33, verse 40. Muhammad has requested Muslims to propagate, so he can be proud of their large numbers on Judgment Day. Reference Abu Dawood authenticated hadith number 2050. Muhammad's thoughts on his parents. In the following two hadith, Muhammad had openly expressed his feelings about his parents. In the first one, he condemned his father to hell. Reference Muslims authenticated hadith number 203. In the second hadith, he confirmed that Allah would not grant him mercy for his mother, but only permission to visit her grave. Reference Muslim authenticated hadith number 976. This was Muhammad's only means of expressing anger about significant adults of his childhood, the deep emotional difficulties he was experiencing. Born without a father, his mother died when he was 6 years old. He had no siblings, and he was raised in other people's homes, partly by a foster mother and partly with his uncle, an old man who apparently was in need of care himself. Therefore, as a child, he felt abandoned, lonely, and frightened. One would expect Muhammad, if he was really a merciful prophet, to speak well of his parents as well as of the significant adults of his childhood. Muhammad had suffered a great deal of parental abuse, both physical and emotional, a norm at the time. This created in Muhammad negative feelings and behavior that manifested in his involvement in mass killing, the annihilation of anyone who stood in his way, and the gratification of his suppressed emotions and sexual desire in acquiring unlimited wives and concubines. A man who is respected and lovingly cared for in his childhood is extremely unlikely to commit pedophile rape, mass murder, and the mutilated torturing to death of those he deems enemies or criminals. Reason dictates that Muhammad must also have suffered serious emotional harm at the hands of other adults, including beatings and other physical torture. Humans do not become sick with hatred and fury unless it is aroused in them by their experience of others. The following is a summary of Muhammad's abusive practices. First, labeling women as evil. Second, claiming his marriage to a 6-year-old girl to be divinely directed and blessed. Third, marrying his adopted son's wife through a divine ceremony. Fourth, executing some 800 men in one day. Fifth, claiming that he is capable of having sexual intercourse with all his 9 wives in one night. Sixth, labeling women as inferior creatures. Seventh, preventing his wives remarrying after his death. Muhammad left 9 widows. Eighth, approving the killing of his opponents, some 43 men and women. Ninth, organizing more than 100 raids and invasions for power and personal gain. 10th, labeling non-believers as unclean and calling people of other religions swine and apes. 11th, taking 1/5 of war booties. 12th, maintaining slavery. 13th, claiming a divine decree to acquire an unlimited wives and slaves. 14th, approving the killing of Qarafa and her family and taking her daughter as his sex slave. 15th, taking Rayhana, the Jewish woman, as a concubine after assaulting her people and killing her husband. 16th, approving the rape of non-Muslim captive women. 17th, making many false statements without any evidence, such as the authenticated Bukhari hadith number 5768, in which Muhammad said, "If somebody takes 7 dates every morning, he will not be affected by poison or magic on that day till night." 18th, instructing his followers to beat their children. 19th, casting a curse upon women who do not respond to their husbands' sexual demands. 20th, condemning his father to hellfire and confirming that his mother would not have Allah's mercy. 21st, mutilating bodies and eyes of living people. I'm sure you have received substantial details to enable you to judge if Muhammad was a divine messenger or an impostor who suffered serious mental issues and personality disorder. This is the end of today's presentation. More details on this topic are available in my book, The Islam Delusion. The book can be obtained from my website www.trawondi.com. I will see you shortly for my next presentation of refuting the Islamic doctrine. Goodbye.